Good evening from the University Community Center at Western University. I'm Kat Tang of the Western Gazette, and welcome to the 2024 USC presidential debate between Adam Ersenbach, Emily Kalajian, and Dorian Jones. This debate is brought to you by the Western Gazette, Western University's student newspaper since 1906. The Gazette has designed the format. We'll start with opening statements, followed by direct questions, a question for all candidates, an intermission, a debate period, community questions from the audience, and we will conclude with a final question for all candidates. The direct question period will consist of 4 rounds, with 1 2-minute answers from each candidate. The debate period will consist of 4 rounds with 5 minutes allocated for open debate and rebuttal. I will remind candidates of the rules before we begin each segment. All candidates have agreed to these rules. None of the questions have been shared with the candidates or their campaigns. Good luck to all candidates. We will begin with opening statements. Candidates, you each have 2 minutes. We'll start with Adam Ersenbach.
Sorry, could I get the timer started? I was just putting my stuff down. Hi, my name is Adam Ersenbach. Many of you might not have seen me before. I'm rather new to this organization, but a lot of what I want to do here is see actual change within the USC. When I was in first year, I was a very cynical individual. I was very trapped in my own head, and I never felt like it was going to be possible for me to make actual changes in the university. It makes me sad to look back on all the wasted time that I could have spent trying to make improvements in my community, to build systems, and to understand this organization more deeply. And so many of the policies I'm bringing are attempts to do 2 things. One, I really want to innovate on what this student council is able to achieve. I want to go for big picture items like starting tenants unions, like creating weekly food bundles for students, similar to HelloFresh, so that they can get cheap, easy access to food and help them adjust to adulthood. I think that seeing actual massive change would be deeply inspiring for the student body and be a way to help make sure that when someone comes in first year, they feel empowered to, as the vision statement says, believe that students can change the world, to stop looking at it as a platitude and to start really believing it. But aside from that, I also want to just make the student council more accessible. I want to make politics fun. I want everyone to feel like it's a good use of their time to invest in understanding what's going on around them. For students, your vote matters here more than it's going to in any other election right now. This is going to affect your life more than any federal election, at least in percentage of your actual vote. And you should be paying attention to it, and so I want to draw attention to it. Finally, a lot of the items I have on increasing transparency are meant to do things like make it easier for students to know how this organization functions, what can be accomplished. I want an end-of-year campaign report so that you can hold me personally accountable and you can see how do things work.
Thank you, Adam. Next, your 1 minute is, you have 2 minutes are up. Now we'll go to Emily Kalajian.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emily Kalajian. I want to first thank the Gazette for throwing this event here today and everyone who came in to watch, especially my campaign team. So, where to begin? This is a campaign that is built off of listening to other people. That was something that was very integral to me when I was planning this out and ensuring that the entire platform comes from, echoes of other people who have very unique student experiences. When I came to Western 4 years ago now in Delaware Hall, I remember feeling so small. My parents dropped me off and I shut that door and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm here, I'm ready to go. But I still feel in some ways, a little small as well. This is a big university. We all have unique experiences. And that was really integral for me when building this campaign to ensure that, everyone felt represented in that platform and the policy. So, where to begin with the platform? We want to focus on professional development and ensuring that, after your time here at Western, you feel best prepared. That's a really big focus for us, but while you're here, it's really integral that you feel safe, you feel supported, you have fun. But what are the ways that we aim to do that? Campus culture, campus life, different events around those things. Professional development's a huge thing. Financial literacy, throwing a gala to allow people to increase their networks. That's a huge thing that we want to focus on. But it's also really integral that we really targeted student groups to ensure that their voices are represented and listened to. That's what this means to me. I have a huge passion for this role. This is something that's so exciting for me, and to be able to work with different people and to gain their insights, that's been such a reward. So overall, that's the bigger picture, listening to others, amplifying their voices, and I'm really excited for the rest of this debate, so thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Next is Dorian Jones.
Hi guys, for those of you who don't know who I am, Ashley just said, my name is Dorian Jones, and I would like to start by telling you about why I decided to do this in the first place. My entire candidacy surrounds building a community and eliminating divides that have tainted our campus. These divides are very prevalent, and just some examples off the top of my head are COVID-19, which really brought down student engagement, also the social implications that have seriously created a divide on our campus, as unfortunate as they are, but also even just looking at first years in general, there is a clear divide between them and our community, and that is exactly what this campaign seeks to do. It seeks to build on this community and to take away those divides. So how do I plan to do this? I call it the Jones Plan, where every single letter in my last name represents a pillar: justice, outreach, necessities, experience, and support. And just to give you guys like a brief introduction to each of those, I want to tell you about some of the policies that will come from each of those. In the justice portfolio, we have things such as multi-faith prayer rooms around campus. We definitely need more of those to create a safe environment, and maybe more spaces specifically for the 2S LGBTQ+ communities, because this is important. Secondly is the outreach portfolio. In this one, we really need to lock down on transparency and make things more accessible. How do I plan to do this? Through OWL, we need to make everything accessible in terms of providing information, providing links, providing everything they need. In terms of necessities, we have rezoning for student housing. It is imperative that we do this because of the increase in students on our campus. In the experience portfolio, we obviously want to have really good things for you guys, and so that's why I want to bring back dollar beers, have it on a weekly basis, and finally, in terms of support, we need mental health resources. I have created a new mental health plan. I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you for listening to my introduction.
Thank you, Dorian. That concludes the opening statements. Next, we'll begin the direct question period. These questions are targeted at each candidate and based on their individual campaign and platform points. There are 4 rounds. You will have 1 minute to answer these questions. In round 1, we're going to begin with Adam. Adam, your leadership experience comes from being involved in debate organizations both at Western and nationally, as well as Western's chapter of the Kappa Alpha Society, 3 groups with no ties to the USC. How are you going to lead an organization you've never formally been a part of?
Yeah, so a couple things here. One, I've done my best to integrate into the USC. I would come to council meetings. People audibly gasped when I asked a question because I was the first person to ever ask a question in a town hall ever. And aside from that, debate is something that still has a lot of opportunities for management. First of all, I managed QSID, which oversees 20 clubs across Canada. This is still a high-level, wide management role that I think is relevant to the experience. But also in managing the debate club itself, this is a club that has to manage events that bring in 500 people. Our high school tournaments bring in 500 students, judges, this kinds of things. We have to manage travel to other countries, to Spain, Vietnam. It's a role that requires a deep amount of ability to make fast and effective decision making. I think it's still widely applicable.
Thank you, Adam. The next question is for Emily. Emily, in your platform, you focus on a number of issues that involve collaborating with Western to implement more EV chargers on campus and creating more study spaces on campus. These initiatives are under Western's jurisdiction. Why do you think the USC should spend time and resources on this, where there's more red tape, compared to initiatives that directly fall under your purview?
Thanks, Kat. So one of the things that I've been really fortunate to do over my last 4 years at the university is work heavily with administration. It's been a really wonderful opportunity to do that. And I think with the USC in partnership with working with students, a large thing you have to do is also work with admin. So when you're talking about study spaces, when you see people on campus who are sitting on the floors or the chairs in the UCC themselves being broken down, we owe it to students to ensure that they have the resources here. EV vehicles, yes, you're right, there's some red tape around that. However, by 2035, by the federal government, we can no longer purchase regular gas cars. So how is the university going to restructure that? What is our plan as the USC for travel and transportation? How are we going to be able to address that? So ultimately, yes, there is red tape, but that is the job with this. You have to do hard things and facilitate things. And I think ultimately through my experience with the Senate and working with administration, these are things that we can advocate for and get done.
Thank you, Emily. The last question in this round is for Dorian. Dorian, more than half of your platform points are advocacy-based, but as you acknowledged in your interview with the Gazette, most advocacy work cannot be achieved over the one-year presidency term. Why do you think devoting the majority of your resources to advocacy is the best use of your time as USC president?
Okay, I think that there's a lot of answers to this, but just to give a very clear and concise answer, I want to say that I feel like people tend to avoid advocacy initiatives just because of how difficult they are to actually implement. This is a very big problem. Why is this a problem? Because as long as people are avoiding advocacy initiatives, there will be no change. Yes, I said that it is a process. Advocacy doesn't take place overnight. It is definitely a process. But it is very important to acknowledge that we need to at least begin this process in the first place before we just actually decide to start doing a whole bunch of other things. It is very, very important that we actually start somewhere, and that starts with me in office if you elect me as USC president.
Thank you, Dorian. Moving on to round two, starting with Emily. Emily, in your platform, you mentioned implementing a system for USC's off-campus housing services called Rate My Landlord, where students can share their experiences with different landlords and buildings. This platform has the potential to receive unjustified bad reviews and could generate libelous or other legal issues. Why do you think this is a good idea for the USC to implement, given the potential problems that it could pose?
Thank you for the question again. So with Rate My Landlord, one of the things that we can especially see for international students is they don't really have a general lay of the land. Like myself, for example, when I came here, I'm from Windsor, I heard about Old North, I knew about the neighborhood, and I was able to gather some information about what's there, how close it is to campus, things like that. But if you're not so familiar with London, you need some context of what bus stops are around. Are your landlords going to, respond very quickly? Is it a safe place? These are things that people want the answers to, but there's not a centralized area or website to look at. It's really vital that this is anonymous for safety issues that this website, like the template that it follows, but also it's going to be filtered. Right now there is nothing online besides Reddit, which people can use anyways, which is an unfiltered site not governed by the USC. So what can we do to support that and allow for people to gather more information on their landlords and their safety? I thought this would be a really great way, and my team concurred.
Thank you, Emily. Next up is Dorian. Dorian, you suggest establishing a centralized forum designed as an anti-racism tool for individuals to confidentially report discriminatory incidents. Since Western's Human Rights Office already operates a discrimination and harassment reporting tool with the option of anonymity, why should the USC create and manage your proposed forum?
I want to preface that there were lots of changes made to our platform, and this specific policy, we have been making changes since the beginning of the election. The current reporting tool that the Western administration and the USC uses is for sure outdated. Some of the problems is that people can only submit a specific amount of PDFs into there. They can't list all of the problems that they have. And I feel like one of the biggest issues is that I don't think that anybody has actually heard anything being done with the reporting tool. I don't think that people even know about it in the first place. And these are things that my specific forum will address. We are going to make it very transparent. We are going to make it so that you guys actually know about the reporting tool, and we are going to take specific input from students on how to improve the reporting tool after we've already informed them that it exists. There will always be current updates, and we will continue to make updates to this policy, and that is why we should still endorse this policy on my platform.
Thank you, Dorian. Last up for round 2 is Adam. Adam, in your platform, you suggest subsidizing healthy food on campus, including fruits, vegetables, and probiotic foods sold by Western for a net zero profit margin. What USC service will you reduce funding to for this subsidy, or will students be paying more in ancillary fees?
Yeah, so I think there's a few possible answers to this. First of all, the grocery store itself is owned by Western, and we can advocate for Western itself to subsidize these foods. The reason that this would be good for Western's administration is that, one, this is still relatively low cost. It's still being set at like a net zero profit margin. It's not like you're starting to like lose massive amounts of money over it. But it shows that Western is dedicated to student mental health, and this is something that's important for most universities these days. A lot of high school students feel intimidated coming into university, and mental health discussions are more common online than ever. And so if we're talking about things that would be imagistically good for the university and also low cost, I think this is an easy example. And then if it comes to, I don't know, like being able to subsidize these foods, I think a lot of my other initiatives have the ability to bring in money. Opening the theater again. This is an example of a way we could create the money necessary to pay for it.
Thank you, Adam. Moving on to round 3, we'll begin with Dorian. Dorian, in 2022, soft names were removed in a joint announcement from the USC and Western, following an independent external review that recommended their removal to address sexual and gender-based violence. On your Instagram, you have promised to bring back soft names with the stipulation that the USC will review each individual name and the associated story. Why do you think Western administration will endorse this proposal?
I can tell you exactly why we should endorse this proposal, and I want to start by saying that soft names is a very big Western tradition. Before I even got to this university, I was fully aware of the soft program, and I think that everyone can agree that is a tradition that everybody loved. Everybody. If we endorse this policy, I believe that we can restore the Western tradition. I believe that we can bring back soft names in a manner that is respectful, appropriate, and definitely will improve the soft program because people will be more engaged with it. I want to continue to say that regulating soft names is very, very important. I agree with the previous decision to remove it under the premise that it is not regulated. But with my policy, it will continue to be regulated. If someone asks for anonymity, that is not something that we can promise, but we can promise that we're regulating names.
Thank you, Dorian. Next up is Adam. Adam, you say you will create a student-tenant union within the USC to collect detailed reports from students about their housing conditions. Western's community legal services already provide student renters with legal advice, and there may be a legal risk for the USC to advocate against specific landlords. Why do you think the USC should be involved with this initiative?
First of all, when it comes to legal risk, housing is one of the biggest issues that exists for students. If we're not willing to take any risk to actually improve students' lives, I think that reflects poorly on the student union. I think we should be willing to do things to help people who have been kicked out of their houses, who have been rent gouged, who have had their houses fall apart, or have been infested by cockroaches on a regular basis. I think this is like obviously something that's worth taking risks for. And so, like, when it comes to the actual implementation of this, first of all, we can at least increase communication of this legal clinic. A common theme in my campaign is that yes, many of these services exist, but because they get advertised during O Week and then you're just kind of expected to know about them generally afterwards, you don't go to them. We should have posters every single bathroom saying, are you having financial problems? Go here. Are you having housing problems? Go here. We can at least make this education accessible, if not systematize it to protect students on a broader basis.
Thank you, Adam. Last question in round 3 is for Emily. Emily, you have been on Western Senate for 3 years and now sit as the chair of student senators. Western student senators have already identified 48-hour grace periods, compassionate accommodations, and final grade deadlines as advocacy priorities, but have failed to make a difference in the Senate. Why do you think, as USC president, that your advocacy will more effectively ensure these goals are met?
Thank you. So on the Senate, one of the things that I would like to preface is that policy needs to be agreed upon between staff and needs to be agreed upon between students. And that's a really important distinction to make. During my time as a senator, the conversation about academic accommodations has come up. You're right. However, currently, I'm sitting on the working group to create academic policy. So the only group on campus currently that is working on the replacement for the SRA is something that I've been very privileged and lucky to sit on. So through that, I've been working with deans, provo, and we've been able to draw up new things that we're going to be bringing up at the end of this school year. The same thing applies for the 48-hour accommodation rule. That is not something that has been brought up in my term and has not been brought up specifically with the WSS. Those are things that are much more committee-based. I do have to make that a slight correction. So with accommodations, it is working. These things are happening, and we need to make sure that we're supporting students in this endeavor.
Thank you, Emily. We will now be entering the last round of the direct question period, beginning with Adam. Adam, in your platform, you suggest reintroducing live-in softs to residents. This year, Western's residences are at a high capacity, with some first-year students living in Bayfield Hall, which used to be dedicated to upper-year students. How do you plan to advocate for this, given the limited space available?
Yeah, so I think there's like 2 important points that come to advocacy here. One is just like talking about how important it is with Western's administration. There's already going to be a need to increase residents, given that we are going up to, I think, around like 50,000 students within the next like 10 years. Maybe I got wrong on the exact number. The numbers are increasing rapidly. There's posters about it around campus. There's already going to be a need to change policy on like how many residences exist, how we intake students. And so whether or not we like reintroduce softs this year or merely create plans to introduce them in the next couple years, I still think it's going to be possible. I think softs are important because they have like a level of responsibility that can help protect against students like overdosing, drinking too much. They can protect against gender-based violence. And I think this is a responsibility that is necessary for the university to take on.
Thank you, Adam. Next up is Emily. Emily, a few of your platform points, like creating an anonymous SGBV reporting tool, advocating to Western to create a financial literacy course, and implementing a religious discrimination reporting tool, are services that already exist at Western. Given that these services already exist, why did you choose to include these points in your platform?
So to begin, the anonymous reporting site goes through Western itself, and I'm looking at an external reporting site called Reese, which I think is really, really exceptional. I've had an exceptional time working with them through my past 3 years with One Love. Additionally, when you're talking about the financial literacy course, we're talking about 2277 through Moss, which is a course that I took. Personally, do not think it's very basic level financial literacy. Additionally, this is through Moss. We want to follow a model that McGill is actually using right now, which is free and accessible to all students, not just people who typically go through Moss. And I think with that, that's super integral because we look at the available resources that we have on campus, especially for international students who don't necessarily have exposure to Canadian policy, we really have to take that into consideration. With the religious discrimination tool, currently, the reporting form does not have religious discrimination on it. It says racism only, and underneath in brackets, it includes anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, not religious discrimination.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for your answer. The last question is for Dorian. Dorian, some of your student experience items can be costly, such as bringing back House Olympics, which awarded a $7,000 cash prize to a group of housemates, and creating Western Wellbeing Boxes, where students can register for monthly care packages. What USC service will you reduce funding for these initiatives, or will students be paying more in ancillary fees?
I want to begin by saying that after having looked at the platform, I actually updated it and removed the Western wellness boxes, specifically because I identified that this was costly. In terms of re-implementing, bringing back House Olympics, I think that it's actually very much within the purview of the USC. Given the budget over the last couple of years, I believe that it's possible because of the fact that certain things like the theater have been closed, which also costs money. Other things have also been, for sure, closed down. And so in terms of bringing back House Olympics, I think that it is actually more beneficial to have it implemented, specifically because it is going to increase the student engagement and actually bring more profit to the university. I want to really preface that that's important, that profits will be generated because of the increase in student engagement.
Thank you, Dorian. This marks the end of the direct question period. The next question is for all candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. The question is, what is the biggest shortcoming on your platform? We'll start with Emily.
In my personal opinion, I think one of the things that I'm very proud of with this platform is the consultation that went behind it. So I personally think that with this, there's nothing that I would necessarily take away from my platform. And that's super integral, and I think when you're making a platform, you want to stick to your guns, and you need to stick to your guns through those consultations and ensure that when you are making and drawing these up, you're confident in what you're presenting to the school. So you talk about red tape, you talk about things that maybe are not sounding to be feasible through administration, but that's the point here. Make the dream big and hit the roof, right? I think with this, we want to ensure that, when we're presenting these points to students, there's things that include everybody through very strong consultations. Hundreds of people have been consulted for this campaign, and that's something I'm very, very proud of. As far as shortcomings, I think there's always more things to learn. I think, you can ultimately, when you take these positions and you become president, which is something I would love to do, I think you can take these points and you can mold them and you can change them. And that's something that is very integral, I think, to any leader, to listen and understand where you can make adaptations. So overall, I think, addressing shortcomings is really integral, but I think that comes through conversation and that I'm open to have. But I think sticking to your guns through those consultations is very integral, and I'm very happy with what happened with mine, and I think my team did an incredible job as well. So.
Thank you, Emily. Next is Dorian.
I want to start by saying that this administration also did hundreds of consultations that we really, really valued and were really important to the creation of our platform. But I think it is also important to address shortcomings as the question offers. So I honestly believe that the biggest shortcoming on our platform is the fact that you can never do enough consultations. I think that there's always room for more consultations, and because of this process, there's obviously going to be student groups that we didn't get to. There's various groups on campus, and these groups are continuing to increase. And as long as these groups continue to increase, we can never, ever do enough consultations, and so that for sure has to be the biggest shortcoming. But I also want to continue to say that if I am elected as USC president, the consultation process will never, ever stop. In order to alleviate this specific problem, this specific shortcoming, I plan to continue to visit various groups, ask for their concern. It is very important to be proactive and preventative, and the only way to do that is by specifically listening to students, asking for their voice, and actually implementing things that can abide with our campus. Going forward, if I am elected, each club is going to feel very represented. Each student is going to feel very represented, and that is going to be done through proactive measures such as surveys and more preventative measures such as actually going to events. As all USC presidents always promise, I promise you that your club will be heard, and as long as that remains true, you should be voting me as USC president.
Thank you, Dorian. Now we'll turn to Adam.
I think if there's one shortcoming of my platform, it's that it is slightly too long. And my reasoning when it comes to this is that as USC president, you have a very limited ability to accomplish things in your 1 year in office. There's always going to be a treasure trove of potential opportunities and you want to go down every single route. And so the reason I put all these things in my platform is to show people my general sense of vision, like here are things I care about, here's me explaining all the issues that I think are important and should be worked on. But at the end of the day, you are running an organization that is run by like 50 full-time like adult workers who have a much stronger grasp on it than any USC president ever will themselves. And your job is to find a few big ticket items you really care about and that can push the ball down the road and focus on those. Because ultimately, I think the USC president's job is to create a sense of inspiration within the student body. It's not a purely administrative role. It's a role that is about inspiring students to get involved with student politics, about inspiring them to get involved in the community and to tell them that their university education is going to be fun, that they're going to have a good time, and that they can relax. And so if I rewrote that platform, I'd want to shorten it down to, I think, a few of the most important ideas. And I would have still mentioned the other ones. I think a lot of them are important or deserve like some rationale and focus so that everyone knows that I have done these consultations and I have listened to people. But ultimately, I'd want to focus on the big things. Communication, focusing on finances and making sure students feel safe there. Focusing on food security and making sure students feel safe there. These are the big ticket items that I want to be able to push more effectively. And if I could redo my platform, I think that's the way I would look at it.
Thank you, Adam. This concludes the first half of our 2024 presidential candidate debate. We will now take a 10-minute intermission. Stay tuned for the next segment where candidates will go head-to-head on campus hot-button issues. all candidates please start taking their seats? Please take your seats as we enter the head-to-head portion of our debate. Candidates will be asked 3 question prompts. After each question is read, each candidate will be given 1 minute to respond. Once every candidate has answered, we will then enter a 5-minute open debate where candidates can discuss each other's answers and challenge each other. For our first question, pick an item from one of your opponent's platforms that you disagree with and explain why. What would you do differently? For our opening statements, we'll start with Dorian. You have 1 minute.
Perfect. So if I was to describe one thing from each candidate, I'm actually going to start with Emily. And I honestly think one of the things I noticed was the revamping of classrooms to accommodate for dance halls. This, to me, is not really in the purview of the USC president. And in fact, this, to me, is a big ticket spending item. In order to revamp and put mirrors in these classrooms, this will require to do multiple renovations to each room because each room, depending on where on campus, is definitely outdated and already needs to be renovated. So in order to make it accessible, we're going to actually have to do more revamping. For Adam, I definitely think that it is the... Adam, I'll have to get back to you.
Thank you, Dorian. Next is Adam.
Yeah, so I'll drill into one, and then if I have time, I'll go into a second. I think a very obvious point of clash that exists is the rate my landlord service versus the tenant union service. This is the first one that comes to mind. So the reason that I would prefer a tenant union to simply a rate my landlord, first of all, a tenant union can be a bit more reserved at the beginning. Obviously, with libel issues, I think that's something that does run us into potential legal issues. I think taking time to prepare and educate students to be documenting, for example, when you move in, you're supposed to take a video of your house so that if there's any pre-existing damage, your landlord can't try and take that out of your damage deposit. This is something everyone should know about, and informing and educating students about the things they have to do is one, a way to start documenting abuses by landlords so that if we're going to start making more legal cases, we will be safer in doing it. And two, it allows a much more detailed set of structured approaches than simply rating landlords, which again, you can have like biased students. There's a lot of subjectivity that goes into it.
Thank
That's
you,
all.
Adam. Now we'll turn to Emily.
So I'm not really personally a fan of these kinds of questions because I think the whole point is not really to pit us against one another. I think the biggest thing that we are seeking out with this role is to support students, and we all have the same end goal. If I could pick something that's a general theme between both Dorian and Adam, it is the lack of points on their platform with accessible education. This is something that I think is very integral. There's thousands of students who are represented under these groups, and it was really integral that that consultation happened for my platform personally. But again, I think these questions are really problematic, and I think what we're trying to do here is foster student support and energy, and pitting against each other is maybe not the best way to do that, but I do understand that, you know, every platform might have something that people have personal differences with, but overall for me, I think it's not so much something that's on the platform, something that's not necessarily on the platform at all.
Thank you, Emily. We will now enter a period of open debate. To start, Emily, you have the floor.
So with the dance spaces, one of the things that I personally think is that something has to be done. Because when you're walking down the social science tunnel, or when you're walking into alumni, and there are many student groups who are there, they do not have the space or the access. Student services has a large budget, and they are able to actually provide foldable mirrors to these rooms. So that is something that is an option. And I think working with facilities management is a great way to start. However, we need to find a place and something to balance those two things. Rate My Landlord is a great place to have open discussion, and I think when it's filtered, I think that's really important and necessary to have that open discussion, because students don't necessarily have that access, especially first years and international students.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, again, just rating landlords I don't think would be sufficient. I think we need a much more systematic approach of actually educating people like how to make claims, like what like your actual rights as a tenant are. So at the very least, when you make reports, it's much more reasonable. I also think that when it comes to like missing out on any specific policy point, I think one thing I want to be careful of is, again, as USC president, you're very limited in the kinds of initiatives that you'll be able to take on and the number of initiatives you can take on. I think that finances and food are one of the biggest issues that exist for every single student, especially more marginalized or poor groups. And I think it's important to make sure that everyone like has those available. And I think that will hit a broad audience.
I want to start by prefacing that in terms of the dance spaces, I totally agree that there should be more dance spaces, but that's not to say that I think that the policy that has currently already been listed is the one that we should be using. I still think the infeasibility of it comes from like the big ticket spending items, and like in terms of renovations and all sorts of things like that, but that's not to say I disagree with including more dance spaces on campus. In terms of getting back to Adam, what I actually wanted to say about that was you actually have something about blue phones on campus, like they act as emergency phones, which people can go to. I also want to say that this is a big ticket spending item on yours, and that's something that I identified from both candidates. But that's not to say that I don't want to take more proactive measures in terms of making our campus safer. But in terms of implementing more of those phones, there have only been 3 calls on them in the last couple of years, and it is really important to identify that each one of those costs like thousands of dollars, $20,000 to $30,000 per blue phone, and I think that there are applicable methods that we can be using.
While I understand that, I think something that I've been able to learn actually at school is something about like routines activity theory. So what happens is when you have somebody who's vulnerable walking around, what ends up happening is if you don't have that sense of protection, what happens is when you have a vulnerable person and you also have a likely offender, when they see the blue phone, it stops people from actually even perpetrating that violence. So what that means is when I'm walking home and it's dark at King's and it's pitch black, I know that there's something ahead of me. But you know who also knows? A likely offender. So that's why the calls aren't necessarily utilized, but they're really integral for that reason.
Yeah, and I think that was excellently put. And I want to say, like, first of all, it doesn't necessarily have to be done by the USC specifically. I think we can advocate for King's to take this on and say, yes, this is a reasonable safety precaution.
King's is part of the
exist.
USC.
like the entire university is owned by the USC?
Well, their programming would be with the USC as well.
No, but I'm saying the university itself can help pay for it rather than it being USC spending. And I would say that generally, just like one point I've been trying to get across generally is that like, I don't know, all of our policy platforms have been pointed out to have issues. Like we all like drop out on one point or another. And I think that's like reasonable because again, this is like a really large organization that is difficult to work with and difficult to fully understand, especially as an individual, no matter how big your campaign team is, no matter how many people you're working with. And most of the things I want to accomplish are based on improving that process, improving that ability to get institutional memory, so we don't need to be like floundering on the debate stage, each of us trying to like point out like, oh, well, this, that kind of thing.
I agree that blue phones on campus stop people from engaging in violence or anything to that effect. But that's not to say that there's other options like cameras, which is for sure a cheaper option. When people see cameras, they tend not to engage in anything that is going to get them in trouble. So I definitely think that cameras can also be the solution to that problem. And I also wanted to preface that as well.
I think the other thing as well is work with the USC, you can work with the municipal government who also can provide these resources, especially in neighborhoods like Old North that are connected to King's and Western Main Campus.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to the next question. Western has a reputation for providing a fun and memorable student experience. The USC has a hand in this through concerts, orientation week, beer fest, and other programming. What makes your plan for student events the best compared to the other candidates? For our opening statements, we'll start with Adam.
All right, I love Western. I love purple, what can I say? And I think that when it comes to like having fun student events, again, I think a lot of my focus comes down to like working on the smaller things. We already have really good big events. We already have Purple Fest, and that costs us money. Like it's a big event to be putting on. We don't necessarily need to like have more huge events. I just think things like opening up the movie theater and playing films that people are actually going to appreciate. And even if it doesn't make money, I still want to have foreign films in the theater. I want to see RRR because that's a good movie and it's only in North America so long. I want to have, and I think that like, you know, if we play films from like a diverse set of filmmakers, even if it doesn't make money, it's still like morally valuable. It's still valuable in terms of like giving people a more diverse worldview. And given how often this kind of issue comes up and how important it is to people, I think it will make money.
I want to say that,
Thank you, Adam. Now we'll go to Emily.
Thank you. So contributing to the student experience, one thing that was very found true in my platform is this contribution to professional development. So you'll see, even in the fun stuff, there are opportunities for students to grow in their career. So you see our collaboration with Forest City Film Festival, also reopening McKellar Theater. It provides entertainment for us, but also people who are interested in films and in the arts. They can collaborate with a professional company and provide that reciprocal relationship there. Live performances at the Spoke, lifting up music students and giving them the opportunity to build their music resume, but also provide us entertainment as well. I really also want to elevate Frost Week. I think sometimes what happens, Frost Week comes and it goes, and giving residence council support on that, but also creating new events like après ski events on our outdoor fields with heaters, things along those lines. Just little things for people to look forward to and kind of add to their student experience besides, the Purple Fest and an orientation week and things like that.
Thank you, Emily. Next is Dorian.
I want to start by saying that I also very much do love Western. And for this exact reason, my fun events and student policy engage perfectly with Western tradition. I think when we engage with Western tradition, it makes our campus unique, and that is exactly what I seek to do. So in terms of bringing things back, I already talked earlier about bringing back House Olympics. I honestly think that this was something really, really fun for Western, and I think it's imperative in the current digital era that we live in to be engaging with digital media, and that is exactly what House Olympics seeks to do. In terms of other policies, bringing back dollar beers. I know that that was something that existed on campus before, and people love that Western tradition, and this administration seeks to bring it back. So if there's one thing you guys should take away, Western tradition is what makes our student events the best.
Thank you, Dorian. We will now enter a period of open debate. To start, Dorian, you have the floor.
Perfect. In terms of the events that you guys actually have planned out, I think that there is a specific reason as to why, as Adam mentioned, the theater was really, really fun, but the problem with it is that although it was really, really fun, students weren't really engaging with it, and I think that's definitely something important to acknowledge. When something is removed, it means that, you know what, this isn't something that's perfect for our campus. And to say that we're gonna bring it back, there is no promise that students will actually be fully engaged with this theater.
Yeah, but if you look at the films they were playing in these theaters, it would always be like Marvel movies, but 6 weeks late. Like, I think that having a good selection of films would be a lot more like efficient. We're gonna have American Psycho. We're gonna have Wolf of Wall Street. We're gonna be bringing in that Ivy movie, or that Ivy money to the rest of the campus. We're gonna pander to whoever is able to give us money, because that's good for the rest of the student body. And I think that, I don't know, that's worth pointing out.
Well, I think that's an excellent idea, and to kind of lift up that morale, I think also, exploring options that lift up students. If my roommate or my friend was displaying a film at McKellar, you bet I would be there. And I think with this film festival, it would only be for a couple of days.
Oh, I also advocate for a film festival in my platform.
That's awesome. I think on top of that, we can kind of work together on that. So kind of building off what Dorian says, to increase that engagement, allowing students to come in and showcase their talent and uplift the arts and increase their professional development opportunities on campus. That's a great way to do it.
Actually, in addition to that, I also add in having more camera equipment, having it more accessible and more widely advertised, so that if students, even if they're not in FIMS, have a passion for film, they might be able to contribute something to this. It's something I'm pretty interested in. I think social media is really important. Film and your ability to present yourself visually are important for business, like literally every walk of life, and it's something I've really pushed for in my platform.
I want to say that although he has mentioned really, really great movies that we all love and are very nostalgic, I want to say that there's obviously movies that we all love, but once you get through all of those movies, we are back again to low student engagement. We are back to a theater where we're running out of ideas, where we're specifically placing movies that, like he said, are 6 weeks late and things like that, because you can't run through nostalgia forever.
Well, it's like half a year. It's like, what, 26 movies? Like, it's like, there's more than like, even if you were to be an entire 4-year bachelor, there are more than 100 good movies in existence that are worth playing. Like, this is not, we're not gonna run out of movies.
Yeah, I think the theater is a really great thing to harp upon, but I think we also want to really talk about the idea of the student experience. So, I think this is, you could talk about it, go back and forth, but I think ultimately there are greater plans in all of our platforms that I'm sure we want to highlight through this. So, whether it's dollar beers or whether that's Frost Week, I don't know if that's the most integral thing to kind of go back and forth upon. However, I think that ultimately one thing in this gap that we kind of realized in second semester, I think this Frost Week concept and elevating that and making sure that residence councils are supported and they have the opportunities to engage with multifaceted levels of programming with upper years and lower years. I think that would be a great way to start.
For your gamers out there, I would love to gamify university. I think having little things like you get an achievement if you go to Fanshawe Conservation Park, you get an achievement if you go do this or that. Just little fun things to get you to go outside and spend a little more time having fun. Maybe we even have a little award for people who manage to do this kind of thing. I think it's about looking for fun ideas that appeal to a very broad range of people, because I noticed that a lot of programming tends to be targeted towards certain audiences, towards very broad mass media audiences. Let's start targeting the people who might be, a little more out there, a little more gamer.
I actually want to say that I actually 100% agree that certain audiences are definitely targeted and that there should be change. But what I want to definitely say is missing to me from both of the other candidates in terms of student events is that my fun events are things that we know already work. People love them in previous years. I'm not even completely sure why it is that the USC took them away, but I'm confident that these events that engage in Western tradition, we already know that students love them, but we are not 100% sure that students will be fully engaged in very new ideas. Not to say that we shouldn't have new ideas, but I can tell you that my events, we know we love them.
For dollar beers, the reason that it was taken away was due to a safety concern that occurred a couple of years back, and just trying to figure out how to include first-year students on campus. I do think it was a safety concern. However, I also do understand the tradition of dollar beers that does exist at Western.
Look, man, I want to get people excited about student politics. Let's do new things. Let's try new things out. Let's innovate. I think that's way more fun than just doing what you know already works.
Thank
and
you,
doesn't.
candidates. We'll now move on to the next question. You all have different approaches to Greek life. Adam and Emily, you present an approach where each fraternity or sorority would receive special privileges on a case-by-case basis that was overwhelmingly shot down by USC Council just 2 months ago. Dorian, you didn't address Greek life in your platform at all. Why is your approach the best? For our opening statements, we'll start with Emily.
Thank you. So I personally believe that Greek life is a population on campus that will always be here, and nothing so far at the USC has seemed to work. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Each organization individually has different culture. Talking to people on Theta on my team, if there are more than 4 people in Theta in one room, it is considered a Theta-sanctioned event. They do not have the houses or the facilities for rooms, and they are very open to have training and abide by the rules that the USC does present to them. So when we look at it, individual groups from Greek life should be able to come to us and individually take the autonomy and say that they would like to complete this training. As for what happens next, that is something that needs to be done with consultation and needs to be talked about with the student body in general. But I think they need to take the initiative, and we need to say, this is a group that isn't going away. We need to support them how we can, but with an approach that is not one size fits all.
Thank you, Emily. Next, we'll go to Dorian.
Yes, I did not address this on my platform, but that is not to say that I don't actually have applicable ideas. Like Adam said earlier in this debate, we cannot be providing policies. I didn't want the platform to be too extensive, so let me right now tell you what I think we need. In terms of engaging Greek life, it is imperative that council, but also the Greek life chapters, are meeting up on a regular basis to actually have discussions. I never see the USC engaging, or USC Council meeting up with these chapters to talk about actionable solutions of any sort at all. So what I really want to preface is that there's a lack of communication between the chapters and the USC, and this administration seeks to strengthen that. Yes, we can all agree that there's specific criteria that they need to follow in order to get back into the USC and follow their mission, but that starts with communication. There is no communication between Greek life and the USC.
Thank you, Dorian. Next is Adam.
Yeah, so first of all, minor correction. As I understand it, it is not chapters being taken individually that was shot down. It was brought up in the meeting by one person, but the resolution was already made for it to be about the IFC as a whole being taken in. These are radically different approaches, and I think that that's worth mentioning. So second of all, I think that my approach is similar to Dorian's, though I did mention it directly in my platform. And that's that I think it's about taking the proper process and doing things the right way. I think a lot of Greek life feels a bit disrespected or not really listened to. And I think that's fair. I don't think most people on campus or on council have spent much time directly talking to representatives from Greek life. And so what I support is forming a body to start having these conversations. And I don't have much direction about where that has to go, because I don't think that's something we should try and decide from the start. I think it's about making sure people feel listened to, that they feel respected, and then we make a decision that's good for everyone.
Thank you, Adam. We will now enter a period of open debate. To start, Emily, you have the floor.
Thank you. So at the council meeting, one of the stipulations to the original policy was if Greek life members completed training, then they would have access to US or UCC rooms. Because of that, I think it turned a lot of people off, essentially, because it was almost like you're getting free training to get a free room, and there wasn't much of a relationship built there already. And I think ultimately treating every organization individually will allow for a relationship with their organizing structure to come into fruition, which is really important. They're all different organizations and they all have different cultures, and I think that's something that we have to really understand because there's so many of them. And like I said before, and as I've said again, it's not a one-size-fits-all, and this is something that comes from consultation with both people in Greek life, outside of Greek life, and I don't think, as Adam mentioned, it's not really something that we can plan out right here. It needs to be done with consultation. Rather, the approach needs to be planned out ahead of time, and this is something that I think, as well as many other people from Greek life that I've consulted, also believe in.
While I do agree with both of the candidates in terms of outlining criteria, I think something that's important to mention is that there needs to be a strengthening of the bond. In terms of strengthening the bond, that is where we can actually see that the USC will not just be looking at Greek life, and the Greek life will not be just looking at the USC as outsiders. I think both groups view each other as outsiders, and that is where the problem begins. Strengthening the relationship is very, very important, and yes, we can all have a plan in terms of criteria, but we need to address this first.
Like, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to like strengthening the bond, unless council starts going to a lot of like frat parties or like having actual hangouts, it's unlikely that there's going to be like a deep bond between these organizations. That's why I focus, my mic like audio is a little tinny. That's why I focus more on things like practical and formal organization towards doing this, because I don't think at the end of the day council is necessarily going to be like close with Greek life, and I think there are a lot of reasons for people to like have very strong negative personal reactions to Greek life because issues have existed. But it's just about making sure that the process has been done in a professional and responsible way more than anything.
I think in some ways, though, council does represent members of Greek life because they are students here. And so if we push people to the side and we don't accept that they might need extra resources, especially people who are going off campus for different meetings, again, there has to be criteria, there has to be accountability, and there has to be training. But if there's not 100% attendance to this training, and I think at the end of the day, it's a contractual agreement, right? When people come to you and they want something, it's a contractual agreement. And I think Dorian hit the nail on the head there. Like, it's a bond that we all have to kind of create. But I think that will be done when it's individually selected and that bond is curated by an organizational structure. So ultimately, yes, there are people that have reservations, but they are still students. And I think when we look at that and we have to think, what can we do so that people don't feel isolated? And more violence or anything of that sort that we've seen in the news throughout the years is not perpetuated, and we're providing the education that's necessary to help people, because that's what we're trying to do here.
I think what I'm asking, though, is like, what does that really look like? Is it like council just going to frat parties more, like spending more time with Greek life? What do you mean by strengthening the bond?
Yes, that is exactly what I wanted to respond to, because I don't think that strengthening the bond necessarily means that the USC has to be engaging in party culture. What that means to me is if you look at our current club system, I don't think that every club is looking at the USC like, oh, you're my best friend. That is not the relationship required to build a community. What is actually required is building a connection that is, one, strengthened from the relationship that we already have, but two, at the level of clubs. If we look at clubs right now, lots of clubs are being integrated into the system with just a regular bond of just, they get to pop out, they get to speak to the USC on a consistent basis, and that is a version of strengthening the bond. So I think that that's important to elicit, because party culture is not something that is absolutely required for the Greek life to be involved in the USC.
I'm honestly still unclear how this is different from anything I've suggested with trying to create like a delegation to have regular conversations with Greek life. Though I do want to say I also put focus on strengthening the bonds with clubs specifically by focusing on like sending counselors to clubs, like sending them to AGMs so that they know they have an in. Because like I don't want everything to focus on just strengthening a bond with Greek life. I want to make sure every club feels involved in this organization.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move on to the final open debate question. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East have affected many students at Western University. Looking back at the USC's response, where do you think the student government can do better? For our opening statements, we'll start with Dorian.
This is something that I really, really wanted to express. My campaign seeks to eliminate divides, and that is exactly what she has just mentioned has created a very big divide. We need to start with one thing, addressing that there are problems on our campus like hate crime. The USC, the administration of Western, and Alan Shepard need to start there before we can even start talking about actionable solution. Addressing the problem is imperative, and once that is done, we can look to my platform, which talks about updating an anti-discrimination tool, which will specifically aim to make this campus safer. This is imperative, and if you elect me as USC president, I promise you that we will eliminate this divide.
Thank you, Dorian. Now we'll go to Adam.
Yeah, so if we're going to talk about this specific response, I think there's a few things that I have addressed directly in my platform that I think needed to be improved. First of all, in terms of speed of communication, I think this is crucial. It took like 8 days to 2 weeks to put out a statement about like the conflict, and I think that this is not reasonable, given that the ability to act quickly on something that is important to students is necessary to show that they are cared for. I think when there are cases of assault on campus, this is something that is clearly outside the bounds of what is reasonable and acceptable, and it is something that the USC should and like be able to like make a statement about quite quickly. I also think, having more effective consultation with student groups, some student groups got passed over in talking about these issues. I think this is also important. I would also say, just have a good focus on what the responsibility of the USC is and how it fits in. The focus should be on student safety, on addressing exactly when and how we are going to do things to improve students and their feeling of safety.
Thank you, Adam. Next is Emily.
I think first of all, I just want to extend it, I can't imagine how some people on this campus are feeling right now. I think this is something, the empathy aspect of it, I just want to be a very good listener with this issue. I think when people don't feel like they're heard and they feel more exhausted after a conversation about something that they care about has been done, we're not doing something right as leaders. And one of the things that we've learned through research with the platform is actually the USC charter doesn't recognize racial discrimination formally in the charter. And I personally believe that if the foundation that we are built upon is missing this piece, a very important and relevant thing that is going on this campus, like Dorian mentioned, there are people who are being legitimately hate crimed on this campus. We need to be empathetic to that, but we need to formally address this in the foundation that exists for the USC and talk about this as something that we do not tolerate and bolster support for people who are hurting.
Thank you, Emily. We will now enter a period of open debate. To start, Adam, you have the floor.
I guess if there was one thing I was going to point out, it's that I think it's important to address those foundational things, but I think that in terms of how these things actually happen, most people aren't going back to the documents to read about whether or not this is something outlined as good or bad. I think the way it works is that you have a sense of responsibility towards students, and you have a clear outline of what is the USC's job. And I think I've done my best to outline how the USC should take responsibility in this situation.
I think this is a really hard topic to debate because I think we all want the same thing, which is campus safety. At the end of the day, what we want here is campus safety for people to go to their class and feel like they are going to be okay and not have to look over their shoulder. That's the most important point here. And I personally think that a charter is a mission statement for how we lead our roles and our jobs here at the USC. So that's really important when it comes to job description, how we're going to carry out our operations here. But ultimately, I think what needs to be said here is we want the same thing, which is safety. So debating this topic, it's a hard thing because I think we all want one common goal.
And I think ultimately, I do appreciate Emily's point that there are foundational things we need to address. And I think Dorian has a good point that it's about, doing things to prevent further division from existing on campus.
I want to say that what I actually think is required to eliminate this divide, it starts with having someone that actually can understand. As someone who's a Black individual, I completely understand what it means to be in a situation of prejudice, to be in a situation of racism, and even what hate crime looks like. I'm someone that completely understands because of my background. I want to say I'm very fortunate to not be from either of the backgrounds that currently are experiencing one of the worst issues currently that we can talk about at this campus, but I can promise that I do understand. My experiences, my entire life has basically led up to this moment where I can preach about I'm a person that is approachable, I'm a person that is real, I'm a person that can understand, and if you elect me as the USC president, I promise that this is something I can guarantee, understanding.
Thanks for sharing that, Dorian. I think that was an excellent point. And I think ultimately, one of the things that we have discrepancy here with the university for any kind of reporting is that people don't feel like when they do report, anything's going to be done with it. And one of the things that I think people are seeking is action or statements and listening and feeling like when they go into a room, they're being heard. However, with our current discrimination form, as mentioned in the previous session, it doesn't have anything listed for religious discrimination. It has one section listed for racism, and underneath that section it has, little segments basically stating the different types, but also including Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Religious discrimination deserves its own space in this, because we know that this is a rampant problem on this campus, and we need the precision, we need the data of what's actually happening so we can show numbers and express that this is an issue, and the reporting tool can be more legitimate. So I think with institutional change and bolstering that support that people can be listened to and heard, they can come into an office and feel like it's a safe harbor, that's really important, but our reporting tools have flaws already, and that needs to be improved.
I guess I think it bears highlighting that my approach is a bit different from Dorian's. I personally, obviously can't understand, really anyone else's suffering, but particularly people in this situation. And for me, what I like to focus on is just the concrete details of what I think are important. I think speed of communication is important. There's an issue in which someone was assaulted on campus, and it took too long to speak on this. There is a situation in which the USC was asked to investigate about it by clubs, and where they were met with, and these clubs were met with silence or a lack of detailed explanation as to what the USC can or can't do. I don't think I'll ever be able to fully understand another person or what they're going through. What I hope to do is describe the things that I will be able to do for them and the forms of communication I can do to make sure that if something like this happens again, I will do my best to make them feel safe about it.
I concur with the other candidates that this is completely something that needs to be addressed. I think everything that they said is valid. As unfortunate as it is, I believe that I am someone that can for sure understand, and that is required in this role.
Thank you, candidates. We will now move into the audience question period. If you are interested in asking a question, please line up in front of Ichaya, who is at the back of the seats waving her hand. When you reach the front of the line, you will be asked to tell her your question before you are given the microphone by Miles, who is wearing the black sweatshirt. Wave your hand, Miles. Please keep your questions succinct to allow for as many questions to be asked as possible. Thank you.
So my question is to all the candidates, and it is, what initiatives do you have currently in your platform to help amplify Indigenous voices, make them feel seen and safe on campus?
Okay, do we just respond?
Yes, you can just go ahead and respond.
Yeah, so for my platform, I find that a lot of responses to racism on campus can often be quite reactive. What I want to do is have monthly forums with cultural clubs or any other relevant representatives where issues can be brought directly to the USC executive so that rather than waiting for something bad to happen, we can start fixing problems right away.
Although I don't have anything specific about Indigenous relations on my platform, I want to concur that I have done many consultations, especially with all of the VPs, and I concur with them that I will continue to collaborate with the ISA and on their current initiatives. I think it's really important to not speak out of turn and not say anything that isn't useful. And so that is the number one reason why I want to say that the biggest thing is to really just continue the efforts that the VPs have laid out in terms of Indigenous relations.
When speaking to somebody who worked at the ISC, they mentioned in a quote that really resonated with me, and they said that Indigenous people are always made to feel ignored, and that really, it hurt me a lot when I heard that, and just as an ally, trying to figure out ways that we can ensure that their voices are amplified. So one of the things I'd like to do is have an Indigenous relationships coordinator, and that would work under the University Affairs portfolio, which I think would be very important to ensure that they have some sort of leadership in the field, and they can get access to resources, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. I think additionally to that, I would like to have a lacrosse game that is led by Indigenous leaders in the area with the varsity lacrosse athletics teams, and collaborate with people in the area so that we can do informational and educational events during that game. At the halftime, have an elder come and speak. There can be performances. I think that would be really special to highlight Indigenous culture and a really great way to bolster that support in the community.
Hi, candidates. So Western nursing students have some very unique concerns around placement and affordability. How do you plan to address any of them and represent nursing students better?
So I have a few friends in the nursing program, and I've been able to talk to them and consult with them. And one of the things that I've learned is a lot of the testing that you have to do to get into placements also costs fees. The NCLEX costs a lot of money to take as well. So we do have a fund in our platform that we'd like to use to support people in going towards their careers in their future, whether that be for the MCAT, the LSAT, nursing school, things along those lines to improve that bolster of affordability.
Yeah, so when I talked to someone about this, what I was told is that there's actually some lack of clarity among nursing students themselves for the issues that exist, especially in a connection with like Fanshawe College and like how it is connected to Western's nursing program. Ultimately, what interests me is like doing more to like investigate and fully understand this. I don't know it because nursing students themselves don't seem to either.
Changing the affordability is something that is, once again, advocacy-based. To say that changing affordability for nursing students is directly within the purview of the USC president, that is not true. I can promise you that we're going to advocate to make things more affordable, and that requires advocating to the federal and provincial government, specifically for nursing students. But what I actually think I can actually do to help nursing students is to create more transportation between colleges like Fanshawe, because a lot of nursing students from Fanshawe actually come here for classes, but they don't really have transportation available. I think putting shuttles in place is something that's really perfect. We already have shuttles to all of the affiliates, and this is something that I believe is actionable.
So a specific question to the last question that was asked in the last round about a particular conflict. With regards to conflicts and issues that affect students from outside campus, from all over places in the world, censorship has been a historical position of the USC. And I want to ask, with regards to that question, what is your balance in terms of towing a party line or keeping unity within the organization, but also representing students' views and giving space to student leaders to express their opinions?
I think with this, it just starts with listening. I think it starts with having an open door policy where you know that no matter your background, your history, anything, you can come in and you can feel like you're heard. There's gonna be proactive conversation and action to that. I think especially in the cases when it comes to discrimination that happens on campus, because it is fostered by things that are happening outside of the country or things like that, it is integral that we address them, and we address when people feel unsafe, and we address how this campus has the resources and the support to ensure that they feel listened to. I think that's 100% the way to go about it, and just have that open door policy to make sure that people feel like they're cared for.
I think Emily touches on some really good points here. And ultimately, I think that what it comes down to is, as annoying of an answer as this is, it happens on a case-by-case basis. Listening is important because it is always about the context in which something occurs. So one small point I can add is that I think that often a focus on creative solutions is the best way to address these. So often, if someone feels unsafe, it's more about creating ways for people to feel safe than simply shutting people down. But again, this is such a broad question that I couldn't answer it directly in any way.
Although I want to concur what the other candidates are saying, I completely agree with Adam. I completely agree with Emily with everything that they believe in terms of addressing the problem. But I think one thing I really took away from your question was that word of censorship. And I think the USC and the Western administration, they have done a really lackluster job of not engaging in censorship. So as I already repeated before, this begins by addressing the problem, addressing with official statements that there is conflicts that are going on in the world outside of campus that directly impact our Western community. And this is very, very important to acknowledge. So all things considered, it begins with addressing the problem.
Hello, as you're all aware, I'm a member of the Science Students Council. So the science faculty is one of the largest amongst Western, from medical sciences to computer sciences. What are you doing to help science students?
I love this question. I'm a math and computer science major. One thing I'm going to point out is that within my home program of computer science, there's widespread frustration about the kind of materials that are taught in first and second year. Things like not knowing how this applies to the industry. It's just very frustrating for students because often the material taught is either useless or at the very least not explained why it's useful. So one of the things I advocate for is pushing Senate to do more to get professors to make connections with industry, do things that are going to help students feel like what they're learning is valuable. And I think when it comes to science generally, this is something I'd like to apply more broadly. It's just something I know to exist very much within my home program.
Once again, I think Adam actually raises some great points, even in terms of the curriculum. But what I think is absolutely essential, and what I want this administration to work on, is the fact that there's a lack of, like Adam was saying, there's a lack of transparency in what can actually your degree do. And in terms of doing this needs to come directly from the USC in terms of posting things, making things more transparent, providing more information in terms of what options are out there. How can we do this? Although we definitely hold career panels and there's all those sorts of things on campus, the advertising of them is very, very weak. This is something that I definitely think can be improved upon if the USC engages more with the digital era and posting more on their social media, more on their website. This is very, very imperative, and that's what this administration hopes to achieve.
So a couple things with this. Recently, the Board of Governors just passed that the tuition for computer science is going to be going up. So that's going to be something that's going to affect a lot of students. So basically, in the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to be going up to $3,000, $4,000. So one of the things that you want to tackle is ensuring that when your tuition does go up, what's changing with the program? I think Adam touched on that really, really eloquently. Learning ways and more experiential learning to tailor and to go with that increase in tuition, number one. Number two, science-specific study spaces. They do not currently exist in their full capacity, and I think they just should be advocated for as we expand this university and understand that it's the second largest faculty to my understanding. Third thing, professional development gala, something that I'm really excited about. I think it's a fun way for students to engage with networking and providing opportunities to know, yeah, you're in med sci, but you don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a dentist. There's other career paths, and inviting our alumni to come in and to talk about that, I think that's really important. And to kind of release that pressure that I think a lot of science students feel, there are other opportunities available, kind of touching on what Dorian said before, and we should know about them. I think that'd be a really fun way to say that.
Hi, candidates. Whoa. Hi, candidates. This year, the USC saw a few controversial motions reach council floor this year, some of which failed to receive support of council. If elected, how do you envision working with USC Council to pass your policy goals, particularly if a controversial issue arises during your term?
I think number one with this, it's a team. It's a team unit. When you work with the president, when you work with your executives, your VPs, your counselors, creating a very strong relationship is really important to get things done. I think when you have a relationship where everyone feels very supported and respected and to some level very close friends, I think that really creates a fun environment where things can get done and things can become a lot smoother. So I think that is a hard thing, right? Because a lot of counselors and the VPs put a lot of time towards policy, but I think when you have a really strong unit and a fundamental basis with that, you can get a lot of things done and it makes life a lot easier for everybody.
Something that I think is important to address and also coincides with this idea of a team and building the community is that there are portfolios from my experience within the USC that are definitely separate and they all have separate meetings. Now, when a controversial issue comes up, I think it's imperative that all of these groups actually have group meetings sometimes because they tend to stay very, very separate, and that is definitely a lack of communication. As long as the portfolios are all collaborating together, I believe that we can not just achieve, but we can also overachieve.
Yeah, so great points from both candidates. I think that like the first question for me is, why was a motion brought in the first place that would be struck down on like an overwhelming majority, right? I think that speaks to like the kind of approach we should be having, that like, you know, maybe some will be a tight margin. Maybe like sometimes you'll have like 25, 26, whatever. But like in general, like by the time it reaches council, councilors are not there as much to like make snap decisions on whether or not to vote. They're there to feel into and represent the community for everyone else. And so if something's that controversial, my response would just be to like work on it until something can be made. The reason that I want an end of year report on every campaign goal that I have and describing what worked, what didn't, is because I don't want it to just be checking off a box of, well, I tried it. I want it to be that like I actually do everything I can, and if it fails to come to council, that's fine. Like, not every goal will be achieved, and that's something you have to accept as part of politics.
Hi. So I know all of you have said you've consulted with various groups among the Western campuses when creating your policies. One large population of this campus is the student athlete population, which has over 1,200 students, me being one of them. I'm just wondering how each of you have identified the biggest concern affecting Western athletes right now.
So I can, I think, start with this one. I have a few varsity athletes who are actually on the team, and I think something that they really expressed to me was a nutrition plan. There really isn't any planning in terms of nutrition, and I think that although it's not directly within the purview of the USC president, we can definitely advocate for nutritionists and dietitians who can help our athletes, but in addition to that, creating a website where it outlines all the types of nutrition that athletes need, maybe different forms of meal prep that actually align with that of the nutritionists if hired, and that is what this administration has in store for athletes.
Yo, Dorian, I love this idea of having like prearranged nutritious meals for people. I think we could take this even further and make it so that student athletes can go to local stores and buy high protein foods for cheap. Because one of my biggest frustrations as someone who loves lifting is the meal prep. I made this food bundle policy literally because I hate meal prep so much and it's a constant stress on me. And, and I think generally speaking, that's the kind of thing I want to do to improve students' lives.
So it is to my understanding that dietitians are a resource that many athletes do have on campus through Fowler and through their coaches' resources. But I think another thing to kind of take a look at is the mental strain that it is to be a varsity athlete on this campus. They can practice up to 30 hours a week, especially if you're a captain, you have a lot to take care of. And I think that that's something that we have to identify at the USC and bolster that support through engagement. I know I grew up playing sports and, you know, having a lot of people in the stands and showing that support, it meant something to me. And I think that means something to our athletes as well. So one thing we want to do is have USC varsity games where we can, you know, provide some programming and show our support and, you know, encourage people to come watch, because that's what really matters, is showing that support. Additionally, I think having a reporting tool for athletes is really important. We've heard countless people talking about how sometimes they don't feel mentally safe on their team, and they need a place to share that experience. And I think that's really important. And just recognizing them as a legitimate and massive group on campus at the USC is a great place to start. And through consultation with the Mustang Athletics Council, as well as coaches and players and along those lines, I think that's really important, and just an element of sympathy, because not all teams are given the same amount of privileges compared to others. And I think that's something to take in consideration. There are 1,200 people all going through different things. That mental health aspect's a huge one, and giving them an outlet and that bolster of support is really integral.
Hello. Oh, sorry. I believe that you would all consider yourselves pretty well involved with student government and or leadership. Of course, this experience shows your qualifications as presidential candidates, but it can also lead to a sense of complacency. If you become president, how will you be prepared to work with anti-establishment counselors to bring about real change and transparency to the USC?
I think for myself, with the Senate, one of the hardest things that you have to do is go against the grain. You have to. You're working with administration, and a lot of the times they have different goals than the students themselves. And when you're one of 14 people and there's 85 faculty who might disagree with you, having the courage to kind of get up and say, no, this is what we need, it can be hard sometimes. And I think with that experience, yes, Senate is technically has affiliation with the USC, and you can call that establishment, but a big part of being a student senator is going against that grain and saying we need change, and finding out how to do that rationally, finding out how to do that in a way that's taken seriously is also very important. So that would be my way to tackle that.
I think your question actually goes hand in hand with something that I already mentioned. Being proactive and being engaging in prevention. By actively engaging and sending out surveys and actually popping out to different events, different clubs, and actually asking them for their opinion, we can actually avoid things like this. And that's how change can actually be made more efficiently, even though student politics is very advocacy-based. Proactivism and prevention is the key to all of this.
I would say that I am slightly outside your description. I would not describe myself as a typical USC insider, and I think I already go against the grain somewhat, though I don't think in a way that would be particularly harmful to my ability to interact with people. Ultimately, I still have a lot of the same interests as USC counselors. Coming into the council, I actually have discovered a lot of respect for people, seeing that they care about their job. But I think that ultimately, the kind of thing I'm trying to do is having a willingness to be a bit more different and think in a way that is going to take us more in the future. If you want to take the initiative, be the first person to ever go to the town hall. Be the first person to ever ask that lady at the desk for the financial services that Western offers. Write a 17,000-word vision statement on where you want to go after you're done with the USC and how you hope to achieve decentralized political change for the rest of your career. I think that in terms of being willing to take the initiative, I'm probably the most qualified candidate.
Western tradition can be understood as male-centric party culture. How will you keep campus safe and not uphold rape culture on campus?
So one of the things that I've been very fortunate to do during my time at Western is to work with an organization called REIS. When I was in my second year, I was able to speak at the GBSV walkout with the Safe Campus Coalition while being the VP Outreach for One Love Western, and that to me was honestly, I think the thing that led me here, looking at people's faces and trying to figure out what to do in such a, at a time where so many people were struggling. And one of the things that we did was give resources such as REIS. And I remember when I left that conversation, 30-ish people had made profiles with the organization and had written out their stories. And I think that was super amazing. And Anonymous Reporting is very survivor-centric. It gives people the ability to make it their own story, and I think that's super important. And for people who don't necessarily want to report directly to Western. I think the other thing is improving the lighting on campus, like Adam and I were talking about before. It's all about that routine activity theory when you have a vulnerable person on campus. When you feel like there is somebody watching you, you're most likely are not going to perpetrate. And we need to ensure that there are places that are lit up. There are places that people feel like when they're walking from main campus to King, sometimes even near Brescia, that they have that support there too.
So I think there's a few things. First of all, I don't think there's any centralized Western campus culture, though I do think there are more visible aspects. So for example, Western party culture tends to come out of, for example, fraternities, or at least they are part of that. And so first of all, I think a lot of the things I want to do, this is more of a side note at the beginning, is just do more things to create wholesome culture, do more to focus on creativity, so that people have something going on in their lives, and it means they won't want to risk the good things they have going. But I think when it comes to really directly answering the question, I think there's two things. One, just focusing on creating more safety protocols. Things like better training of security guards who are going to be there at events. Things like, being able to select your foot patrol and having better training for those foot patrols. I think a lot of these individual actions create an environment where students know that the USC cares, and they're much more likely to take any complaints they have to the USC and speak out about it. I think the second thing is that the USC and Western as a whole often holds leverage over groups that like are involved in party culture. So again, we don't just think of it as like some amorphous blob like Western culture. It's that it comes out of, for example, fraternities. Fraternities want to be able to like use Concrete Beach. They want to be able to use room bookings in the UCC. And so what we do is we say, here are the things we find unacceptable. Here's the training we want you to go through, and meet them, essentially meet them at getting them to like put away the things that really aren't worth it, like sexual activities that are like risky and not just like bad for the other person, as obviously true as that is, but often like risky and a waste of like life and a huge risk towards the person doing it. We think that like there's no incentive to really be a bad person. There's no incentive to like be sexually violent towards people that really lasts. It's an obviously like wrong, like bad way to live. And so doing what we can to reach out to these parts of community, make sure that they are like working more in line with what we think is appropriate, setting strict standards, having strong communication and strong sense of accountability. This is what we want to accomplish, and this is something we can do in a very tangible way.
I want to say that both of the candidates have actually mentioned something that I both believe in, which is a survivor-centric approach from Emily, but also safety protocols. This is totally something that I agree with, and I'm not going to like continue to repeat their points. I think it's important to acknowledge that the other candidates, they really have great ideas that I also believe in. So in addition to that, what I also want to do is point to the anti-discrimination tool that we have. That tool, although the idea specifically came from the current issues that are going on our campus, that is not to say that they're not applicable to SGBV. It is definitely applicable, and with these tools, what we hope to achieve is that this campus becomes a safer place. This campus is a community, this campus is a place that we care about, and this campus is a place that we all want to feel safe in, and that is 100% something that our administration believes in. So I wasn't gonna, repeat all the things you guys said. I love the things you guys said, but that is how I plan to do so if elected as USC president.
Hello, check, check, awesome. I am a proud member of the University of Western Ontario Debate Society, a club that fosters critical thinking skills and competes at the highest level against schools like Oxford and Harvard regularly. What I want to point out is this is one of many clubs that do very important work on this campus, but are not ratified and get no support from the USC. That is, there is like 250 applications every single year to be ratified, and only 12 get selected. That is unacceptable. These clubs go into the graveyard of communities. They die out and fizzle out because they do not get sufficient support. Year after year, there's students that ask for policy to actually address this, but we are left out. What are you going to do to support these hundreds to thousands of students that have their own small communities and clubs and create the creative communities that we have here?
This is something that I 100% believe in. The debate community is very big, and that's just one of many clubs that actually have many accolades that they are representing Western and they're not being recognized at all whatsoever. So what I want to direct you guys to is an explicit policy that I have on my platform, which is creating a directory for non-ratified clubs. I think what's important to acknowledge is that these clubs are important and they're still a part of our campus. They are still a part of our community. So this non-ratified club directory is going to specifically link students to the clubs that are not ratified so that they're actually informed about clubs they can join. All of these clubs on campus that are not ratified all produce work that is very, very great and needs to be recognized, and that is exactly what my policy of the directory seeks to do.
Yeah, so I'm a member of the debate club, full disclosure. I think one thing that bears mentioning is that with a club like debate, there's reasons for it not to be involved with the USC officially. It often goes on like long trips, and we talked to the admin about it. It would not be worth the cost of associating with the university. That being said, I think where I would address this most directly is a policy like my belief in grants transparency. So if a non-ratified club wants to take out a specific grant to do something, I would be willing to extend that to them. So for example, if debate wants to go to Oxford to debate against teams from Ivy Leagues and large British universities, that's something that could be seen as valuable, or that's something that could improve Western's prestige as an institution. And so in general, I would say that it comes down to giving non-ratified clubs more ability to ask for those grants, and I would apply that to any club that exists.
Firstly, I wanted to say that that's very frustrating, especially considering the amount of work that I'm sure both yourself and Daniel, you both have done. I think one of the things that through consultation that we've met with other people is just the support along the way to figure out how to get into that ratification process and the accessibility to that information. So one thing that our team came up with to kind of work on is to create open office hours with people who are looking to join a club or create a club or have a club already and just have a question, and just to ensure that that communication, that direct line of communication is open between the student and student services at the USC. For example, myself, One Love Western is not ratified through the USC, and that had its own reasons as well, which I understand. And that provided different opportunities, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to ratify or to not. It just was something that their founders decided not to do. So I do understand where you are coming from completely from there, but I do think what needs to be done is increase that open level of communication, which can be done through those accessible drop-in hours.
Beyond the managerial aspect of USC presidents, what does leadership mean to you, and what sets you apart from your fellow candidate?
One of the things that I think I learned from one of my human resources classes, it's a line that's always stuck with me, and one of my teachers said to lead with empathy. And that, to me, when I look at my friends or people in the community and they do that, it is something that I think is it's so impactful. You know, when I, for example, see my roommate who's the captain of her varsity team, and she misses meals to go support her friends and to make sure that her team's taken care of, you know, that to me, it goes above and beyond, right? That's something that we're taught about at the rec center, going above and beyond all the time and all the work that we do. So I think leading with empathy and being understanding and listening, working as a team, those are things that just from that one little line in that class I really carry with me for, you know, leadership positions now. And I think that's super integral. So looking and listening to the people around you, but also doing what you can to support others.
Unfortunately, we are nearing the end of the debate period, so we must move on. For those of you waiting in the line, please feel free to speak to the candidates after the debate is over. Thank you, everyone.
Honestly, I've heard so many of them throughout the debate. It's like I'm trying to click through a mental file. Honestly, I'll go with the fun one. I think the idea of House Olympics sounds pretty good. At the end of the day, I think finding more ways to enrich Western's culture is a pretty enjoyable thing to do. I think this is like something that, again, like whenever there's like a low overhead cost way to improve student life, or something that can be especially like pushed forward by students, I think that's a beautiful thing and what my platform is about.
Thank you, Adam. Next is Emily.
Okay, so I think for Dorian, I think one of your points was really cool that I liked with like between faculty and students. What was the name of it again?
You mean the event that was sort of like a charity event where all the sports groups, that one?
It was like I don't know, like an obstacle course with faculty, with faculty and students. I thought that was a really engaging way to kind of, you know, have students and faculty, I guess, get together in a way that's not so professional and just kind of be humans, you know? That was really cool. And I think for Adam, I think your focus on mental health was very admirable. And I think that was something that you tackled head on, and I very much respect it. And looking at that and reading through your platform, it was something that I really enjoyed, and good job, both of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Now we'll turn to Dorian.
I think there was lots of things on both candidates' platforms that I really, really love. I really love my mental health strategic plan, but Adam, I honestly, truly believe that your mental health plan is something that is totally implementable. I think it's very feasible, and that is totally something that I would want to add to my mental health strategic plan as well. So if you guys haven't checked that out, please check that out on his platform. You can tell that he's really gone through the consultation process and done it properly. For Emily, something that I think that my platform lacked was academics, but you are really strong in that, and what I really loved was your professional development programming. Linking students to career professionals is something that I think is totally implementable. I also think that it's imperative because a lot of students don't know what direction to take. So that is something that I know your Senate experience has really drawn out, and I really value both of those ideas. So thank you for putting both of them on your platform.
Thank you, Dorian, and thank you to all of our candidates. With that, we're at the end of the Gazette's 2024 USC presidential candidate debate. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight, and be sure to follow along with our elections coverage at westerngazette.ca. Remember to cast your ballot between February 1st and 5th. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.